Hello and welcome. I'm Janice Teo, standing in for Eugene Low today on a Slice of Life hour on 938 Live. Your DIY motivation today is self-mastery through training the mind. And helping us to do this is my guest today, Pamposh Dar, who's a counselor, corporate trainer, and meditation teacher. As a counselor, she likes to lead her clients towards growth while also helping them resolve their problems. She counsels both children and adults using different kinds of therapy as appropriate. As a corporate trainer, Pamposh specializes in helping employees accept and even embrace the change that is today an inevitable part of corporate life. Pamposh runs the Teratai Reiki and Counseling Center here in Singapore and has been counseling, healing and training for the past 12 years. Welcome, Pamposh.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Let's talk about self-mastery then through training the mind. What does it mean, self-mastery through training the mind?
Well, I think the mind is probably the most wonderful gift that we have. It's really what allows us to live the kind of life we want, to build the life we want and then to live it and to meet our own goals. But to make the best use of your mind, you have to be in control of it instead of, just following your mind. And most of us are probably somewhat master of the mind.
Okay.
It's not either or. But real self-mastery, really being in control of yourself, of your life, of your own reactions and responses and making conscious choices, that requires you to be master of the mind as well.
Perhaps to understand how we can master of our own mind, perhaps it can help if we understand what is it like not to be in control of our own minds.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Well, let's start with that. Ask yourself a few questions to test how much you are really master of your mind and of yourself.
Okay.
For example, can you focus on any task? If you decide, I'm going to do this, and will your mind go along with you till the end?
How long does the task take?
any, that's why I say,
Right.
are you so much in control of yourself that you can set the agenda and your mind follows? So you say, it might be something very simple like writing a report.
Okay.
Yeah? If it's something that you really enjoy, then you probably will stay focused on it till you've finished it and you'll enjoy doing it. But if it's something that you need to do for your office, say, because your office requires it and you find it a bit boring, how many of us actually get distracted? How often? I know I go through this myself sometimes. I say, okay, I've worked on this for 1 hour. I need a break. I'm going to take a 5-minute break and play a game on my computer.
Okay.
Next thing I know, it's half an hour later and I'm still playing that game. That's a distraction that the mind throws up.
Is that a distraction or procrastination?
Either one.
Okay.
But where is it coming from? That's the point. Is that your conscious choice, your decision that you're going to delay your project, or is it the mind playing games? Because the mind sometimes has a mind of its own, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So that's one way to check how much mastery you really have over the mind.
Oh dear.
As I said, it's not either or. Most of us do have a good amount of mastery. But still, sometimes the mind gets away with things. Another way to check is what happens when you are angry. If you're in a situation, somebody upsets you, do you really make conscious choices? You say, okay, I'm angry because of this. This is the issue. This is what I want to say. How many of us are able to do that?
Oh, that's a tough one. Yes.
Most often, you're really in reactionary mode. You're in, the mind is on autopilot.
Okay.
Somebody's hurt me, I'm going to hurt them back.
Right.
That's not a conscious choice. It's just a sort of a reaction which you haven't thought through because you haven't thought about what your goals are. Why are you doing that?
Okay.
That, if you think of all that, that would be a conscious choice.
Right.
And then you tell your mind, okay, this is my goal. You help me meet it. That's mastery.
Right. Okay.
But instead, the mind is on autopilot and the mind is saying, okay, I'm going to hurt you back. That sort of thing.
So before we achieve self-mastery of our mind, it sounds as if we are fighting with our own minds quite often through, our daily lives.
Yes, I think so. I don't think it's, it's not a war out there, but
It's war inside.
yes, but there is some amount of conflict, I think, for most of us. And I
Okay.
think just one more thing quickly where you
Yes.
can see it very, very starkly is when you try to give up something that you know is bad for you. So you tell your mind, okay, don't crave cigarettes anymore. But it doesn't happen very quickly. It might happen over years that you're able to kick a bad habit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were really master of your mind would say, all right, I follow your instructions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And smoking is, of course, that's a very hard one. It's an addiction. But say people have bad eating habits.
Right.
I have that problem a lot.
Some of us do, yes.
Every time I see a tub of ice cream, there goes all my resolution.
Right. So,
again,
with master of the mind, does it mean having a certain amount of willpower and being focused and having clarity of thought?
definitely clarity of thought. That's very important. Focus is important as well.
Okay.
I think. Again, I don't want to say that it's really, you don't have to really fight the mind all the time. You work with the mind. You make the mind your friend. Mm-hmm. That's what I teach anyway. I think that's the best way to self-mastery. It's, if I can take an analogy, it's something like taming a wild horse.
Okay.
You can't do it with brute force.
Right.
You have to use certain techniques. You have to work with
and be flexible.
The nature of the horse, which means you have to understand the nature of the horse. And in our case, we have to understand the nature of the mind.
Mm-hmm. And ourselves.
And ourselves, exactly.
Right. Okay. So how do we do it then?
Okay. Very easily said. Train the mind, but quite hard to do. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes will, it takes the intention. So you set your intention, you make your choice. That's your goal. You're going to train your mind. And then you start where you are. So you need to understand where you're at. You need to understand the nature of the mind in general, and you need to understand the kind of mind that you have and how that's shaping your choices. And
how do we begin to understand that? Do we have to understand personality types or understand how we react in certain situations and be very conscious about how we want to alter that or tweak it in some ways?
Yeah, I think there are two ways. One is the personal and one is the general, There are certain characteristics of the human mind which are common, I think, to everyone. Mm-hmm. So we can start there.
Okay.
For example, the mind is restless.
Right.
We apparently, scientists tell us we have 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day, all of us, and they're, all kinds of thoughts. Some are really about important issues, others are not. Mm-hmm. So the mind is restless, it wanders, and our attention follows our thoughts. So wherever the thoughts take us, we tend to go there. Mm-hmm. Secondly, the mind is easily bored, especially when you're doing a task that you don't really like we talked about, we said before.
Writing reports.
Yeah. Yes, for many of us, writing reports. So if the mind gets bored, then it starts distracting itself.
Okay.
So it's easily distracted as well.
Okay.
So that's the first lot, if you like. Restless, easily bored, easily distracted.
Okay.
Then there are two major parts to the mind, the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Mm-hmm. And the unconscious mind apparently is a much bigger part of the brain for most people than the conscious mind. Mm-hmm. And this is where a lot of our conditioning goes. The things that we grew up with, the ideas we grew up with, even without realizing that we think like this. And these ideas about ourselves as well as about others, all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So a lot of girls, for example, grew up thinking they're not pretty for some reason.
Right.
Or kids think they're not very intelligent, or a child might think he's very intelligent in some ways but not very creative. Often this is conditioning. When you actually take it out of that unconscious part of your mind and examine it, you might find it's not really true. There's no reason to think this way.
And so it takes time to massage it, to tweak it, and the brain or the mind, like, is like any muscle on our body that needs training.
Yes.
So we're going to find out how we can effectively train our minds so that we are the master of our own minds.
Right.
Stay with us on a Slice of Life hour. I'm chatting with Pamposh Dor. She's my guest this afternoon, and we'll continue this conversation in a short while. Your DIY motivation today is self-mastery through training the mind. And to help us do that is Pamposh Dar, who is a counselor, corporate trainer, and meditation teacher. Pamposh, continuing our conversation here on A Slice of Life, our 938 Live. We were talking earlier that the brain or the mind is like a muscle, like any other muscle on our bodies, and it needs training, it needs massaging, it needs conditioning, so that it is performing at its peak and performing optimally. How then can we effectively train our minds to be our own?
Okay, I think, yes, as you said, it's like a muscle. It needs to be conditioned. It needs to be trained. But the first thing you have to do is still the mind before you can even really start training it, before you can look at your choices that you're making and decide whether you really want to carry on like that or whether you want to replace some of your conditioning with new habits. All of that comes later. The first thing is to still the mind, sorry. I was about to say that it's a bit like training a child.
Oh, okay.
Supposing you have a very restless child who's wandering all over the place.
Okay.
First you have to find a way to, get the child to quieten down a little and sit down with you and listen to what you're saying. It's the same with the mind. Because as I said before, it's wandering around all over the place. It's very restless. So
how do we do that?
Okay, I find that the most effective tool for stilling the mind is meditation.
Okay.
And meditative techniques. You can also calm yourself with in other ways, for example, through music. But when we're talking about training the mind, then I think the mind needs to be still, but the mind also needs to be in a kind of receptive state where it's willing to learn the new habits that you want to create for yourself, where it's willing to be trained in a way. It needs to be still alert and focused and still.
What happens when the mind is still? What sort of state generally do you find people are in when their mind is still and calmed and focused?
Well, a still state, a calm
quiet.
state. The brain waves do slow down.
Okay, and the breathing is...
The breathing is slower as well.
And regular.
Yes, very much more deliberate, more controlled. And that's also a way to go into meditation. That's called breath meditation.
Okay.
That you actually start by consciously slowing down your breathing and breathing with deliberation instead of just automatically as we do throughout the day. We tend to do more shallow breathing, and we do it without thinking about what we're doing. So we focus on the breath, which is actually a meditative technique as well. And then as you go deeper into meditation, then...
So no distractions are allowed during this state of mind then. Are we able to achieve this calm and still state of mind, say, for example, when we're exercising?
It's not the same. It's not the same state of mind, and I think if... I'm not a scientist, but those who do study the brain will find that the patterns of the brain waves are different during exercise and during meditation. In meditation, you go into what's called an alpha state, where the brain's waves move in a different pattern. So it's a different effect. Meditation does calm you, and exercise can also calm you to some extent if you're very worried about something. But in some ways, it's a bit of a distraction rather than a real stillness.
Right. It's working off nervous or over-energized state.
Yes.
Right, okay.
It does make you feel good because you do release endorphins.
Yeah.
But our aim here is to really still the mind and train the mind. It's not so much about just feeling good.
Okay, we'll talk more about stilling the mind, how we can achieve that. It sounds like a very difficult thing to do, for me at least. My guest is Pamposh Dar, and we'll continue this conversation with Pamposh in 15 minutes on the Slice of Life hour on 938 Live. Welcome back to A Slice of Life Hour with me, Janice Teo, today on 938 Live. I'm standing in for Eugene Low. Your DIY motivation today is self-mastery through training the mind. And to help us do this is my guest, Pamposh Dar, who's a counselor, corporate trainer, and meditation teacher. Pamposh runs the Teratai Reiki and Counseling Center here in Singapore and has been counseling, healing, and training for the past 12 years. For more information, visit her blog at Teratai, that's TERATAII.blogspot.com. Continuing on conversation, Pamposh. Now, you know, every day we come into our office or we go to school or whatever that we do on a daily basis. We get up, we have a cup of coffee, we rush through breakfast and we beat the traffic, get into, you know, the crowds, taking transport on the roads and the train and the buses. And by the time we arrived at our desks or at school, we are slightly frazzled already. How would you say that we can still our minds and calm our minds for 5 minutes every day, first thing in the morning at our desk, so that we're focused for the rest of the day? What should we do?
Okay, there are a few techniques. I think one of the easiest ones is breath meditation. So I can, if you like, I can take you through that. I don't know how well your listeners will respond.
Very quickly, for 3 minutes, how do we breathe in and out? And, you know, I think maybe we don't even have to say meditation. It can be just focusing your mind on the task at hand or for the whole day, right? Through breathing.
Yeah, it's really a question of focus. And in this case, you focus on your own breathing, which we normally take very much for granted.
Yes.
So for anyone who wants to try this along with us now, I just want to say, make sure you're not driving or operating machinery.
Right, okay.
Please be seated somewhere.
Okay, here we go.
Sit whichever way you like. Keep your back straight if you can. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in. Just a cleansing breath. And now I'm going to help you by counting slowly up to 4 for your in-breath. And your breath must go all the way down to your abdomen. Very slowly. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Very slowly breathing in, very deliberately breathing out. Don't let it all out in a whoosh. So once again, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Continue to do that for a few seconds more.
I've opened my eyes and I'm clear.
Good. Well, that was quick. It was actually very easy.
My goodness. So if we do this every morning, say 5 minutes, it will really help to calm and still the mind and to focus.
If you do it every morning, you'll soon find your day is going much better than it used to.
Right.
But what's important is that you do it regularly.
Right.
I usually ask my students for 15 minutes of their time every day.
Oh my goodness, let's start with 5 minutes.
To start with. Don't tell me you can't find 15 minutes in the day. But okay, 5 minutes will also help you. What's really important is that you do it regularly.
Well, thank you for that, Pamposh. Yeah, it's really interesting. What would you say to people who suffer from sleepless nights? You know, they're probably weighed down by worries, anxieties, and they can't seem to still or calm their minds, especially when it's time to go to bed, when the body really needs to shut down and rest for the next day.
Well, then you do your 5 minutes before you go to bed.
Ah, okay.
You know, that helps you to choose the time. You can also, of course, do 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes last thing at night.
Okay.
And as you breathe out, you can sort of tell yourself that you're breathing out all your anxieties. You're relaxing now.
Right.
So you breathe in slowly. You breathe in fresh energy. You breathe in quietness, peace, and you breathe out all your anxieties. You just say that to yourself.
And hopefully you'll drift off to sleep.
Soon after that.
Okay.
I still recommend that you sit and meditate. Don't lie.
Oh, don't lie down. Okay.
But if you're just doing it as a relaxation exercise, then you could lie down and do it as well to help you sleep. And then this is, of course, a short-term measure. But if you're really working towards training your mind, all these problems will slowly disappear. You will find it much easier. get
Right,
to sleep and so
right.
on. But in the meantime, this is a good way.
It's a start.
Yes.
Now, Pamposh, you're also a corporate trainer, and you specialize in helping employees accept and sometimes embrace the change
Yes.
that is inevitable now as
Yes.
part of our corporate lives. How should we then respond to changes? Because sometimes changes, those beyond our control, can be stressors as well.
Yes, a lot of people find any kind of change very stressful. So I think the first thing is your approach, your attitude to change. And that's why I say accept it. Accept that it is happening
Okay.
or that it has happened. I'm not saying you accept that it's wonderful, because it may not be. Some changes are very stressful, they're very traumatic. But accept that it's happened. Stop wasting your energy on why did it happen? Why did it have to happen to me? You haven't been singled out by fate. These things happen. It's part of life. And there's no life without change. So we need to first of all accept that change is there. And the pace of change is a little faster these days, I think, in many ways. But change has always been a part of the human condition.
Right.
And always will be. So
Right.
accept that. And then take a little bit of control. Because as long as you're saying, why did this happen? It shouldn't have happened. It really shouldn't have happened. You have no control. All you have control over is grumbling and feeling sorry for yourself.
Right.
But when you say, yes, I accept it's happened, it's not a great thing, then you can look at, are there still some opportunities, even though overall it may or may not be a good thing, but are there some opportunities? Can I make it less bad? And then you can think of, can I make it better?
Right.
Now this thing has happened, how do I respond to this?
Right.
And that gives you power.
Okay.
So I think that leads to empowerment as well.
Right, okay. Well, and finally, Pamposh, your slice of life sharing with us today, I believe is a book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Tell us why this book had an impact on you.
First of all, I think this book is very related to what we've been talking about too, because in a different way, it's also about self-mastery.
Okay.
And it again empowers you to take charge of your own life. These are 4 agreements that you make with yourself. The first one is that you will always be impeccable with your word, and that's about integrity.
Okay.
You will understand the power of your words, and you will use them for good instead of creating trouble or whatever. But just be aware that your word has power and use it consciously. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. That is that a lot of times people say things to you that are hurtful. But it's not always about you. Maybe that person's having a really bad day. So don't internalize everything you hear.
Right.
Think about where that person is coming from.
Right.
And this was the second agreement, was the one that really resonated with me when I first read the book, because I was going through a very bad patch at that time at work, where I was feeling that people were putting me down. And then I realized that it wasn't necessarily about me. I needed to think myself about how good or bad my work was, not take on their opinions.
Right.
So that's where I came in.
Okay.
But all of the agreements are really wonderful. The third
Right.
one is don't make assumptions, which is basically look into things, be sure
Get the
what
facts
you
right.
believe. Yeah, exactly. Don't
Yeah.
just believe everything you hear.
Okay.
And the fourth one is always do your best. In any situation, do the best you're capable of doing. Give it your all. And then you don't have to have any regrets. Why didn't I do this or that? Because you did the best you could in that situation.
Thank you, Pamposh. And that's a good way to end on a high note that we should all aim to do our best.
Thank you.
My guest today is Pamposh Dar, who's a counselor, corporate trainer, and meditation teacher. And she runs a Teratai Reiki and Counseling Center here in Singapore. For more information, visit Teratai, teratai.blogspot.com. Thanks very much for listening. You've been listening to A Slice of Life Hour 938 Live with me, Janice Teo.